Okay, hello to all of you. Let's discuss chapter number 18. And in this chapter, we are going to talk about some of the diseases affecting cardiovascular and lymphatic system. So let me go into slideshow mode. So we are going to talk about some of the infectious diseases which affect the cardiovascular and the lymphatic system. So in this, we are going to first of all talk about malaria. We are going to talk about plague. We talk about anthrax. So we are going to talk about around 6 diseases. Okay, the very first one we are going to talk about is malaria. So you guys know about malaria. So it has affected the human population from long time, and it's a dominant protozoal disease. It's caused by a protozoa. It threatens 40% of the world population every year, and the word malaria actually comes from Italian word. Mal means bad, and area means air. So malaria word means bad air. So in the infectious diseases, see, the things are very straightforward, and they are very easy to understand. You have to just remember those things. I'm just going to go over some of the important things because they're very there's nothing to explain in that. It's basically it's very straightforward things. So in this disease there is around 10 to 16 days of incubation period, and the first symptoms are fatigue, aches, nausea without diarrhea, followed by chills, fever and sweating. These are some of the symptoms of malaria. And very important thing to know about malaria is symptoms occur at 45 or 72 hours intervals. And in the case of complications in malaria, there can be hemolytic anemia from lyzed red blood cells, or there can be organ enlargement and rupture due to cellular debris that accumulates in spleen, liver and kidneys. Okay, now in the malaria, there can be a cerebral malaria also, and it is one of the most serious complications of falciparum malaria. So we'll talk about malaria is caused by different protozoa. It can be Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium ovale, or Plasmodium falciparum. The Plasmodium falciparum causes cerebral malaria. So what happens in this disease? Small blood vessels in the brain become obstructed due to the red blood cells adhering to the blood vessel walls. There is a decrease in oxygen supply in the brain, can cause coma and the death. Malaria, which is caused by Plasmodium vivax and ovale, are subject to relapses because some of the infected liver cells harbor dormant protozoa up to 5 years. Okay, as I just said, there are different, so Plasmodium species, they are protozoans, and they belong to this group called sporozoan, and they contain more than 200 species. Okay, but only 5 infect humans: Plasmodium malaria, Plasmodium malariae, vivax, knowlesi, ovale and falciparum. And this disease is spread by the mosquito female Anopheles. And there are in the life cycle of the parasite, there are 2 phases. One is the asexual phase, which is carried out in the humans, and the sexual phase, which is carried out in the mosquitoes. So this basically shows the life cycle of the malarial parasite. So the invasion of the merocytes into the red blood cells leads to the release of fever-inducing chemicals into the bloodstream. Chills and fevers often occur in the cyclic pattern. So there is a pattern: either the fever comes after 48 hours or 72 hours. Plasmodium also metabolizes glucose at a very high rate, leading to hypoglycemia in the human host. There is damage to RBCs, which results in anemia. Accumulation of malarial products in the liver and the immune stimulation in the spleen can lead to enlargement of these organs. And these individual protozoa can express different surface antigens, making it difficult for the host immune system to battle. So how it can be diagnosed? It can be diagnosed by looking at the different stages of these parasite plasmodium in the stained blood smears. And there are some serological techniques also being developed to diagnose malaria. So how to prevent malaria? There are various ways. Staying indoors at night, using nettings like you can see here, screens and repellents, taking weekly dose of anti-malarial drugs. Okay, so in 2016 a major breakthrough in vaccine research occurred with the development of a vaccine called RTSS, and this is effective against Plasmodium falciparum, the most deadly and most common strain in Africa. And this vaccine is found to be highly effective in children. Beginning in 2018, it will be used in pilot vaccination programs, and so it's little old. So it has already been used for the pilot vaccination programs in sub-Saharan Africa. The treatment of malaria, it can be treated by quinine, and chloroquine is a less toxic form of quinine. So these are the basic drugs, and there's another drug called artemisinin, which is a plant-based compound. This is also used for treatment of malaria. The next disease we are going to talk about is AIDS. So you already know what AIDS is. AIDS is a disease in which the immune system of the individual becomes very weak, and because of that the person becomes prone to many infections. And this is caused by a virus which we call human immunodeficiency virus. It's called basically acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So it's a viral disease, and it's caused by human immunodeficiency virus. So symptoms of HIV are directly tied to two things: level of virus in the blood, level of T cells in the blood. And these are some of the initial symptoms: fatigue, diarrhea, weight loss, neurological changes, opportunistic infections, and neoplasm. So this is a disease which is caused by this virus, which is called human immunodeficiency virus. So because of the attack of this virus, and it targets the T lymphocytes, and as a result of that the immunity goes down of a person, and the person gets prone to many infections, as well as to it becomes prone to cancer. Okay, this is a nice table which shows what is the AIDS defining illness, like when somebody gets infected with HIV virus, what kind of disorders takes place in skin, what can happen in nervous system, cardiovascular system, respiratory tract, gastrointestinal tract, and gastrourinary tract. So you can go over them. So the cause of the disease AIDS is the virus, and the virus is HIV virus, human immunodeficiency virus. It's a retrovirus, and it belongs to the genus it belongs to the lentivirus genus. And these retroviruses, they have the potential to cause cancer. So they contain this enzyme called reverse transcriptase, and this enzyme reverse transcriptase can convert the RNA into DNA. So remember that these are retroviruses, so they are RNA viruses. So they have this enzyme called reverse transcriptase, and this enzyme can convert RNA into DNA. So it catalyzes the replication of double-stranded DNA from single-stranded RNA. And these retroviruses can also permanently integrate viral genes into the host genome that is passed on to progeny cells. So HIV virus enters a mucous membrane or the skin and travels to dendritic cells beneath the epithelium. Virus grows inside the dendritic cells and is shed without killing the cell. Virus is amplified by macrophages in skin, lymph organs, bone marrow, and blood. It infects and destroys helper T cells and CD4 lymphocytes, monocytes, macrophages, and B lymphocytes. Virus docks to the host cell surface and induces cell fusion, creating syncytia. Now this basically explains that how does virus, the HIV virus, it enters into the cells and what does it does inside. So basically this is the first step. So the virus adsorbs the receptors on the host cell and is endostized. So you can see this is a virus. First of all, it is going to go and attach to some receptors in the cell, and the membrane gets invaginated like this. This is this process called endocytosis, and the virus enters inside. So inside it is going to uncoat and it is going to release its genetic material, which is the single stranded RNA. With the help of this enzyme called reverse transcriptase, this single stranded RNA is converted into single stranded DNA, and then from first of all it's early single stranded DNA, then it's complete single stranded DNA, then from this early double stranded DNA, then complete double stranded DNA. Now this double stranded DNA can go and integrate into the genome of the host. Okay. Then at that time the gene stays, the viral gene stays latent, and then after a latent period various immune activators stimulate the infected cell, causing the reactivation of the production of viral mRNA. So this is the gene of the virus which is integrated into the host genome. So it gets reactivated, and then there is a production of the mRNA, viral mRNA, and from the viral mRNA it can the viral mRNA, it can be translated by the cell's machinery, and it can make viral components like virus capsid, reverse spike, and all that. And as a result of that, the virus gets assembled. Okay, so from these genes which were dormant, which were integrated into the host genome, they produce viral mRNA, and from viral mRNA is produced capsid. It's produced it produces reverse transcriptase spikes, and then the viruses are assembled, and then they can release, they can move out of the cell. They are released. Okay, how to prevent this disease? Avoid sexual contact with somebody you know who has this disease. Okay. So sexually active individuals should consider that every partner is infected unless proven otherwise. Okay. Barrier protection should be used when having sex. Take some precautions if you know somebody is having this disease. Avoid intravenous drugs, pre-exposure prophylaxis. Okay, basically there is no cure for HIV. There's a lot of work going on. New drugs are being made, new vaccines are being made, but still a lot of work is going on. Okay, the next disease is plague. Okay, now plague has actually killed around 100 million people in the 16th century, and plague can be categorized into three different categories: pneumonic plague, which is basically respiratory disease, then bubonic plague, and septicemic plague. Now, what is bubonic plague? What are its signs and symptoms? So bacteria is injected by the bite of flea, enters the lymph, and is filtered by local lymph nodes. Infection causes inflammation and necrosis of the node, resulting in a swollen lesion called bubo. That's why this plague is called bubonic plague, usually in the groin or the axilla. Incubation period lasts for around 2 to 8 days, ending with fever, chills, headache, nausea, weakness, tenderness of the bubo. Septicemic plague. So septicemic plague is that plague when the bacteria is in the blood. Okay, so pneumonic and the bubonic plague often progress to massive bacterial growth in the blood. So when the bacteria get into blood, that is the septicemic plague. So presence of bacteria in the blood results in the disseminated intravascular coagulation, subcutaneous hemorrhage and purpura, which may degenerate into necrosis and gangrene. Because of the visible darkening of the skin, the plague has often been called Black Death. And the causative agent of the septicemic plague is the bacteria called Yersinia pestis. It's a tiny gram-negative bacteria, and it's a member of the family Enterobacteriaceae. And there are only few bacteria required to initiate the infection. So in the case of plague, basically is the fleas are the principal agents of transmission of the plague bacteria. So after a flea ingests a blood meal from an infected animal, bacteria multiply in its gut. The flea esophagus becomes blocked due to coagulation factors produced by the pathogen. So then the flea is unable to feed, and the flea jumps from animal to get the nourishment. During this process, it basically spreads the infection. Okay, the next disease is infectious mononucleosis. So it's a lymphatic system disease, often called mono or the kissing disease. It can be caused by number of bacteria or viruses, and out of the viruses, Epstein-Barr virus is the virus which causes this disease, and it's a member of herpes virus family. After 30 to 50 days incubation period, these are some of the symptoms: sore throat, high fever, cervical lymphadenopathy, gray white exudate in the throat, skin rash, and enlarged spleen and liver. So a notable sign is sudden leukocytosis. What is leukocytosis? It's basically leukocytosis is basically there is an increase in the number of infected B and the T cells. Fatigue is the hallmark of the disease. Strong cell-mediated response is decisive in controlling the disease. So direct oral contact and contamination with saliva are principal modes of transmission. So usually, basically, when people get this disease, the treatment are directed as symptomatic relief of fever and sore throat, and hospitalization is rarely required. Okay, the next disease is Chagas disease. Now, it is also called American trypanosomiasis, or the new AIDS of the America. Long incubation time required, very difficult to cure. The causative agent is Trypanosoma cruzi. This is a flagellated protozoan, Trypanosoma cruzi. Then there is a different trypanosome which is called Trypanosoma bruzi. It causes sleeping sickness on the African continent. So okay, so this protozoa, trypanosoma, it multiply in muscles and blood cells. Blood cells rupture and large number of trypanosomes are released into the bloodstream. So this disease caused by this protozoa has two phases, acute phase and the chronic phase. So acute phase, in the acute phase there is mild to severe fever, nausea and fatigue. So jagoma appears at the site of the bug's bite. If the bug bite is close to eyes, a distinct condition called Romana sign, swelling of the eyelid may appear. So what happens in chronic phase? It's virtually asymptomatic. Eventually trypanosomes are found throughout the body and interrupt the function of heart, brain and intestinal tract. Okay, they are spread by a group of insects called triatomines, and it can be transmitted vertically, crosses the placenta or by blood transfusion. There are no vaccines available for Chagas disease. Pesticides and improved building material in houses are used to minimize the presence of the bug. Treatment most successful if begun in the acute phase. Drugs are only available through CDC. Okay, the last one is anthrax. Causes disease in the lungs and the skin. Okay, so anthrax is caused by a bacteria and it causes the disease in the lungs and the skin. Septicemic anthrax is a possible outcome of all forms of anthrax. So anthrax infection can be of various kinds. It can be cutaneous anthrax, which means it's the infection of the skin. Pulmonary anthrax, the infection is in the lungs. Ingestion of contaminated food, gastrointestinal tract, then anthrax meningitis when the infection is in the central nervous system. Cutaneous and pulmonary are the most common. Pulmonary anthrax and accompanying pulmonary edema and hemorrhagic lung symptoms can sometimes be cause of death. So the septicemic anthrax, it causes headache, fever and malaise. Bleeding in the intestine and from mucous membranes may occur in the late stages of septicemia. So the causal agent is gram-positive endospore forming rod-shaped bacteria, and it's block-shaped. So central endospores develop under all growth conditions except in the living body of the host cell of the host. So central endospores develop under all growth conditions except in the living body of the host. Okay, this bacteria produces polypeptide. It has a capsule around it and it's made of polypeptide. So this bacteria also produces a toxin which we call tripartite toxin. It's a protein complex composed of 3 separate exotoxins. End result of exotoxin action is massive inflammation and initiation of shock. Other virulence factors of this bacteria is hemolysins and other enzymes that damage the host membranes. So it's a facultative parasite that undergoes the cycle of vegetative growth and sporulation in the soil. Animals, they get infection while grazing on the grass which is contaminated with endospores. Anthrax prevention. Humans should be vaccinated with purified toxoid. If they have occupational contact with livestock or products such as hides and bone. Effective vaccination requires 5 inoculations given over a year with annual boosters. But the person who is suspected of this disease, they are given antibiotics, and they are given antibiotics like doxycycline, ciprofloxacin. Okay, that's all from this chapter. So as again, these are very self-explanatory things, um, easy to understand. But still, if you have any question, let me know.